please put your hands together. Let's bring to the stage Maria as she talks about what is going on in innovation at our good friends over at Stone Brewery.
So, what a day. First of all, thank you for having me. This has been amazing.
Maria.
I had no idea. Thank you. Thank you very much. Steve, thank you for having me. This has been great. I'm reminded of a Thanksgiving dinner. My oldest brother is he's a missionary. He spent 7 years in Cuba and 8 years in Spain. And we're at the dinner table, so he's telling his experiences about building homes for people and all these wonderful things. My other brother is a Baptist minister, so he was telling all of his stories about people and peace and love and all the things. And then it gets to me, and Mom says, "How are you?" And I said, "Well, you want to hear about my latest beer?" So that's what we're going to do. I'm sorry it's not as inspiring, but hopefully we'll get something from this speech. I'm going to tell you about innovation from my experience. I haven't written a book. I'm not an expert. I'm just going to tell you some stories about what I experienced because I've had a really interesting career and very different and certainly not architected, but I learned a little bit about creating things. So I started my whole world from the Midwest. I started, selling Pop-Tarts out in Iowa, made some beer in the Midwest. I moved, I think, 7 or 8 times in those companies and learned a lot. I will say for young people in the room, if you get a chance to work for a big company right out of college, do it because they have a lot of resources and a lot of training. When you go to small companies, not so much, right? Because you got to learn on the fly. So I did that for a little while. That was my first decade or so. And then I get a phone call, and I'm asked to enter the wild world of video games, which back then, and it was back then, I'm old, was, really just 1 or 2 platforms and really, just very, very early stages of putting things on discs. And so it ended up at Activision. Then I went into some other technology companies and ended in beer. So you could say that every male family member, I'm their favorite aunt, for sure. But there's a common link to my background from the time I went over to video games and never really looked back on bigger companies. And that is I worked for founder-led organizations for some reason, and it really wasn't anything that I chose necessarily, but it found me, is that I was really inspired by people that came up with really interesting ideas that I would never have thought of myself. And I'm the good co-pilot, right? They come up with the ideas, I find a way. Tony McGee said, I can kick the snowball down the hill, and then she makes the snowman. So that's kind of, what I think has happened. So Bobby Kotick is the CEO of Activision. And we worked with him. Greg Kaplan, he founded Redbox. Mark Bowles is from San Diego. Does anybody know Mark? Oh, yeah. So Mark, I worked with him with Eco ATM. Tony McGee is the founder of Lagunitas Brewing Company. And then, of course, Steve Wagner and Greg Cook with Stone Brewing. So that's my background. So what does this have to do with innovation? So I went to Activision right out of working for a beer company. And I had some skills in sales and marketing and so forth. So I started there. But eventually, I ended up getting promoted to run a business unit. And my job, my very first job, and this was the first week that I got promoted, I was told, this is your franchise. So anybody heard of Call of Duty? So they said, okay, so unfortunately, it has been declining for 8 years. That game was 8 years old by the time I took it over. And we were losing to this game from EA called Battlefield. Anybody knows that? And it was embarrassing. Our sales were about, 20% off of what they were doing. And, we were telling legacy stories of World War II, and we were trying to tell true stories. And we were doing it over and over, and I think there was just a lot of fatigue with the storytelling and what that was. So we had to challenge ourselves to say, we need to go more modern day. All the consumers were telling us, can you please tell us new stories, new and different things, experiences that are exciting and new? And we said, okay, let's do that. But what is it that we need to create that's going to be authentic? Because we were always rooted in truth in some way, because the best stories come from truth, let's be honest, right? So we ended up pulling in SEALs, retired SEALs, and having them tell us their stories. Not only that, but they loved it so much that we put motion capture suits on them, and they started jumping out of windows at Activision. This is a true story, with ropes and showing us how to do all the things. And we ended up coming up with really, I think, one of the best stories of a modern day adventure, I will call it, because it was fiction, but it was close enough where you could really feel that you were a soldier. And what we learned from consumers, and really the biggest problem to solve in this innovation was, what is going to make this game work? Because we spent $150 million to make it. And just so you know, that's all money out the door before you collect a dollar. And Bobby Kotick, if anybody knows him, you know what he told me, which is that you have to make that in the first 2 days of sales. So no pressure. So, we went, and this was a whole different game. So you never really know if you constructed a hit or not in the world of entertainment. So we had to figure out, what does the consumer want to hear about this game? Because it's modern, but what is it they really want to know? Well, we figured out that there's a soldier in all of us. That's just an average baker. I don't know if you guys remember that television commercial, but we ended up putting all kinds of like post office people and all these things in these situations that were just sort of funny. But ultimately, people wanted to feel like they were immersed in the game, and that's where the idea came from, which created the very first Call of Duty Modern Warfare game. And I don't know if anybody's ever played it. It's still, and to me, one of my favorites. And we sold 500 million in the first 5 days. So I kept my job. All right. Nothing beats innovation grounded in human truth. And I kind of told that story just a minute ago, right? Human truth of like wanting to be a soldier, wanting to feel like you're in a story. Well, one of the things we learned, we were trying to make a game to teach people to play music. And we spent 2 years coming up with how to teach people to play an electric guitar. Who has pretended to play the electric guitar in the air? Thank you for being honest. Come on, we all have done this at some point or another, right? Or the drums, or we think we're really good singers in the shower, okay? It's all true. And it's a human truth. We all love music. We want to participate. But when I would bring consumers in to try this game, and we were working on it for 2 years, and we tried to make it as fun as possible, I'd bring these kids in, and they'd try to play their electric guitar to teach how to do it. And then I would leave the room to get a cup of coffee or something, and come back, and they were sitting there like this. I'm like, what are you doing? Well, we're just trying to skip to the end. I want to skip to the end. I go, why? And they're like, well, I just want to play like Slash. When does that happen, right? They don't have the patience to sit and learn how to play the electric guitar. Steve is a musician. He plays the bass. How long did it take you to learn to play the bass? Several years. Nobody's going to play a video game for several years. It is a proven fact. So we heard about a game in Asia called Tap Tap. And we heard it was a music rhythm-based game that people would stand in line and just all the way around the block with their little cards, internet cafes, if you've ever seen one, and wait to go in to play a game. And it was with a space bar and 80s music. That was it. And they were really just playing along with the 80s music. So what we decided to do is marry that rhythm to a thing that looked like a guitar. Has anybody played Guitar Hero? You realize what you're doing is rhythm. That's all it is. And we added some colors up here to make it a little more realistic and challenging. But you do play Slash in this game, and you can probably get pretty good at Slash within, what, I don't know, an hour or two, something like that. And this became a $1 billion franchise in a year and a half. So that was a hit. All right, another experience. So finding a solution to better consumer experience. So from my video game days, what I learned is that content is extremely expensive. So to make a video game, it's about 150 to 200 million before you sell. When you make a movie, it's similar, right? 100 to 200, depending on the kind of movie you make. But the movie industry was failing because studios were making less and less movies every year because they couldn't afford it. And then the downstream revenue, right, from Blockbuster at the time was also dwindling. And really the only way to support how those expenses were going to go from the studios was to hire, cheaper celebrities, and there's no such thing. And so the founder of this company realized that he could buy content from the studios on day 5. Day 5. So let's say it hits the movie theaters. 5 days later, he could get that disc, and he could get as many as he wanted at a certain rate, and put them in these machines, and you could rent it for $1 a day. And it was magic. Now, the trick here, my job, the problem to solve was, that thing is huge, right? Like, where does it even go? How is even anybody ever going to access it? And what we realized, again, by literally driving in our cars and watching people go from grocery stores to coffee shops to gas stations, we realized where they needed to go, which is in their everyday life. Nobody wanted to drive to a Blockbuster and hope they find the movie that they want to see. Usually you never did, right? You had to get something else. Drive back and forth, hope you don't get late fees, and they make you pay a subscription for that fun. Or you don't have to pay anything, and you come to this place for $1 a day and get whatever you want to see. Usually they're always in stock, and we didn't charge late fees. So enter my job, which was, how do I make this come true? So we went to Walmart, we went to Starbucks, we went to gas station chains, and we told them, hey, would you like to have this service for your consumers that come to your establishment? And if you do, I'm going to give you a rev share. So of every rental, you're going to get a certain percentage of that rental. And they were like, but it's $1. What could it possibly be? So we gave them 15 cents on the dollar. We started with that. Just so you know, by the time these things got to full rate of return, right, which took about 6 months or so, the machine was already paid for, and it was the most profitable square foot in any Walmart or any grocery store or any gas station. So we became very popular very fast, and then it was a trick because I had to make these things super fast, and they're complicated little machines. So it took us going into the contract manufacturing world and learning about how to build kiosks like this that people would be comfortable putting their credit cards in too, right? So the pilot worked really well. We had that big, and then you have that air pocket where you're building and you're spending all that capital and then coming back out. The other side, and let's just say it was a big success, we had more locations than Starbucks and McDonald's combined in the US within 4 years. So there was that. All right, then everybody started streaming movies. So that's kind of a bummer for this company. So so my job became, hey, what are we going to do now? We still need to create some revenue. We like the kiosk business. We have contract manufacturers that can make these cool things. We're not exactly sure, though, what's going to be our next big idea. So I got the job of, hey, you're going to be the new venture person. You go find us what our next thing is. And so we looked at all kinds of kiosk companies. I looked at things that make keys, things that make shoe inserts, things that make eyeglasses, things that make keys. You know, those are all interesting, but not super fun in terms of like, how am I going to get to that kind of revenue like a Redbox? And then I met Mark Bowles, who is from this town. He was from the chip business, the chipset business, and he spent a lot of time in that business to understand how our cell phones and our tablets work. And essentially, that USB port, if you connect to that, you're going to really learn every single thing you've ever wanted to know about that device, if you understand chipsets, which he did. So he ended up constructing a way to go into that USB port, reading what it is, valuing it on the global market, and being able to recycle it in a kiosk and give you money on the spot. We learned that the average consumer has at least 5 devices at home that they are not using. Cell phones, tablets, PCs. Raise your hand if you have cell phones, tablets, and PCs, and you have no idea what to do with it. Okay. The recycling issue, right, is severe. So people are putting these in landfills. They're throwing them in their trash can. It's causing significant issues worldwide. China's the worst. So we were trying to make a responsible machine to solve for that. Mark really had it mostly figured out. There were some things we had to solve for, like, for example, would you really give a machine a device that has all of your information on it? Probably not. So we had to figure out how to, A, wipe the device real time while the person's standing there, give it back to them so they can see there's nothing on it, take it back, and then give it and keep it for 30 days after the person has recycled it, just in case they need it back. So that was a big piece of solve we had to put in our entire supply chain. Also, that machine had to read a driver's license. It had to take a fingerprint, and it had to see you on a camera where I had real-time people making sure that your face matched that driver's license. So it was complicated, but it worked. And we ended up placing these, the best place that we put them were malls. We tried all kinds of places. I went back to my old days. I went to Walmart, I went to gas stations, I went to different places, and it just didn't work. And I realized the why is because that's a planned trip. You do not grab your electronics and throw them in the car, hoping one day you're gonna find a solution on where you're gonna take them, right? You have to know what you're doing when you take your stuff out of your house. So that's when we realized usually people were traveling into strip malls and malls and looking for a new phone. And so we thought, well, they go in there and they get about a fraction of what it's worth. I'll give them a better price, and I'm gonna put it right outside of that Verizon store. And man, that worked, because I got phones all day, right? Because they could sit there, they get $100 maybe, $150, they walk in, they get their brand new phone, they felt great about it. So the idea was so great that Verizon, and as you all probably are doing right now, is that you're getting free phones, or you think you're getting free phones, right? You're leasing phones is what you're doing. They wanted to close the loop on something like that. And in no other country in the world can they actually do that. But here, it's kind of interesting. So we ended up selling this technology on the back end of Verizon and some of the others so that their people can end up, recycling them the right way. But it's been a tricky one. And this also, you can mail your devices in, so they have a mail-in system as well, and it's super secure. So just know you do have a solution for your old phones and everything. EcoATM, Mark Bowles. All right. Next, innovate for both original and new fans. So I was working at EcoATM here in San Diego with my 2 kids. I got a phone call from a recruiter, and he said, "I'd like you to talk to Tony McGee." And I said, "I don't know who that is." And he goes, how don't you drink craft beer? You're in San Diego. And I said, "I do." And I said, "Well, do you drink Lagunitas?" I said, "Of course I do." And he goes, "That's Tony's beer. Tony's the founder of Lagunitas." I said, "Okay." So I get on the phone, and Tony says in the first sentence or two, and I don't know if nobody probably knows who he is, but he's an interesting guy. But he said, "Hey, I'm looking for somebody that has beer experience and technology experience. And you're the only resume that I can find that have that." And I'm like, "Okay." And he goes, "Would you like the job?" Really? I mean, he did this. And so he flew to San Diego. I met him twice at the airport. He offered me the job. 6 months later, I mean, I couldn't say no to the guy, if you can imagine. So I decided to do something completely strange, which is to go back into the beer industry, which I never thought I would do, but it really was true. Technology, because you have to innovate so fast, and you have to know your consumers so well, and you have to read trends real time, or you're going to lose your company. I mean, it's just, that's the pressure that you have. Craft beer is no different. There's 8,000 craft breweries in the US right now, 8,000. Of those 8,000, let's call it 4 or 5 IPAs each. I mean, do the math, right? This is the most competitive consumer segment in all of grocery. That is a true story. So why not? Let's go into this one. So that's what I chose to do. So I went and I worked for Tony, and we had this magic in a bottle, Lagunitas IPA. His goal is he wanted to make it the #1 IPA in the world. So we really didn't sell a lot of the other flavors that he had. We just took this one thing and we attacked markets. We called them tiger teams. We just literally dropped in and we grabbed as many tap handles as we could get every 30 days. And we did it year after year after year until he got the banner of the #1 IPA in the US. We did get that in scan data for Nielsen. But it wasn't good enough, because in the end, they're just waiting to take your tap handle. And if you're that beer, right, everybody wants to take that one off and put theirs on. That's just how it is. So we always had a target on our back. So we needed to get more clever. So the problem here was, what do you do, right? You don't want to lose your original fans, because that's your core. That's people that love you. But we needed more new people. We wanted people to come to us. But the new people are like, I don't drink, I don't know if I want that beer. I mean, is that really for me? So we had to figure out like what's the bridge between the consumers on one to the consumers on the next. So we spent a lot of time with our consumers, the people that loved us. One of the things they liked was the humility of the company. They loved the dog because it's accessible. Tony picked that dog because he couldn't afford to do his own art. He did that out of clip art at a Kinko's and colored in an eyeball. That's true. And people love that beer speaks, people mumble, meaning, enjoy your beer. And he got tired of all the people pontificating about how sophisticated beer is. And he just drink your beer. It's great beer, just enjoy it. So he came up with that line and it stuck. And then the splotch, people really started to recognize. If you ask him where that splotch came from one day, because he added it to the logo on his own, he said that he was driving into work and he couldn't think of a really cool, like a swoosh, like a Nike swoosh, something that would be iconic for Lagunitas. And then a bird crapped on his windshield. There it is. That's actually true. Anyway, so I say all of this to say that we learned things that we had to incorporate into a new way of presenting our company. So that is, will always be historic Lagunitas. What we had to bring people to, though, is what is the modern version of Lagunitas to bring in new people. Now, it may not seem revolutionary to put beer in cans, but this is a flagship. And it was a no-no for Tony. But we got him there because we kept all of the goodness of the old so that we wouldn't lose our core consumer, but we put it in a modern in a modern way. And we started marketing it just a little bit differently, right? And I think that's really what changed everything, because we were right around 600,000 barrels here by the time we remarketed, and literally every single thing we did, whether it was a can, a box, a sock, a t-shirt, a hat, that had to be on there. We made it consistent and we pounded it out on everything we did. And we went from about, like I said, 650,000 barrels to 1.2 million barrels in the new day. So Lagunitas is doing great. Hopefully you guys enjoy it. So there's that. All right, now I'm going to this is going to be in my story on innovation. So the last story is about Stone. Now Stone, I had drank Stone when I lived here in San Diego. Loved it. I ended up getting the job at Lagunitas, right? So I moved my kids and we went to Petaluma, California, where I live today. And, we're up there for 5 years. And then I had finished up my 5 years. We sold the company to Heineken. I stayed with Heineken for 2.5 years after that transaction to get it integrated, and everything was all set, and then it was time for me to go. So I'd been there for 5 years. And I left because I was going to spend time with my kids. I was going to go see my parents. It was going to be great. I was going to travel. And then COVID literally happened the week after I left my job. So I was at home, but I got to spend time with my kids. I got to spend a lot of time with my kids. And so, I was trying to figure out what to do. And I was I don't know if anybody's been in one of those career moments where you're not exactly sure what is your next thing. You're looking at the whiteboard and it's just white. And you're not, you get phone calls about things, but everything feels like the wrong size of shoe. Like you could wear it, but it might not work, and it's going to be, I don't know. And I really, was just thinking about my history. And I actually, much of what I've told you today helped me find Stone, because I remember thinking, I just spent 5 years learning about craft beer and innovation in craft beer. So why throw that out the window and go work for an apparel company or something, right? And then also, like all of this time about innovation and listening to the consumer and bringing something from where it is to where it needed to be, I think I could apply all of that to something else, but what is that going to be? And then literally out of nowhere, I was doing that simple thing of just networking, talking to people that I knew in my life that I trusted. And somebody said, hey, you should call this one person. I got 5 minutes, all right. So I called this one person, and they said they happened to be investing in Stone. And they said, would you be interested in Stone Brewing Company? And I'm like, you're kidding me. And they said, no, the CEO role is open. And I couldn't believe it. And I flew down, I met Steve. I met Greg Cook, I met the team, and it all worked out. And here is my last bit, innovate with a purpose. Stone is one of the best beers I've ever had. It's in the world, and I've had a lot of different ones. But Stone innovates all the time. I mean, you have a different Stone beer. If you know the brand, you know it's always something new, something new, something new. But it needed to have a true north. Like, what are we making? You know, because craft beer is always about brewer-led innovation. But we weren't bringing in new fans. And if any of you know the company, you know, like, wow, if you don't like the IPA, will you like Stone? I don't know. I just kind of that same kind of beer. So we started thinking about brand families. And because there's so much to choose from, it's just a clutter of stuff, we wanted to simplify shopping experience. And brand families is one way to do it. So one brand that I love about Stone is Stone Delicious IPA. For those who've had it, it's really delicious. It's great. It's delicious. It's called that for a reason, because it is. And so we want to make that a brand family. So you're seeing this for the first time externally. We talk about it internally. We're going to be moving Delicious into a brand family and adding a citrus and a double and some other things and making it a brand family. It's easily to shop, and it's a little less busy, right? A little easier to shop. And then the other thing we're going to do, and I'll just say with one story, I mentioned seltzer on one of my very first town halls, and I thought the bomb had gone off at Stone Brewing Company because I didn't realize it was as touchy as it was. I really struck a nerve, but we kept talking about it. And when I went to the brewers and I said, "Is this sacrilege? I mean, is this like the worst day in the world for you?" And they said, "No, we've been thinking about making them for a while. We have ideas." They already had an idea of where they wanted to go. They were way ahead of me. It was just about how does it work for Stone, though? And this is about bringing in new fans. So we call it the Buena Franchise. So we have Buena Vesa, which is our salt and lime lager, Buena Vida, which is our watermelon lime seltzer in a glass bottle, kind of very different than how you see seltzer produced or packaged in the industry. And then we may or may not have more Buena in our family with ready-to-drink cocktails and some other things. And I can tell you this, my best day ever, because you never know if you make the right decision when changing a company's direction. You don't know for sure. It's a risk. I went out to the bistro, and this is right after the seltzer released. And I have been not sleeping well. I didn't tell Steve this, but it was I'm like, oh my God, did I really make a huge mistake? And it was a couple weeks, but we started serving it in our bistros, and these are pretty large bistros. And I walk out, and I see a table of women. And instead of glasses of wine, they all had the seltzer. And then I walked a little further, and I saw another table with like guys with beers and some seltzers, even guys with seltzers. Well, okay. Then I kept walking, and I started to see them all over the tables, and I realized this is okay. We can change and evolve. We just have to have the imagination and the I guess the grit, right? Just go there and realize that people want to love your brand and they want to try new things, and you just have to open your mind to what that would look like, and then innovate. And so with that, that's it. Hopefully this has been fun. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
I have time for one or two questions for Maria and innovation in Stone. What do we got for us, people?
When are we going to get those new brand families?
Very soon. Probably late spring. Thank you.
Maria, what's been your biggest challenge working with founders?
Biggest challenge working
Biggest
with
challenge?
founders. Biggest challenge working with founders, Maria.
They have they have very high expectations. And, it pushes me to do my best. It doesn't always motivate people around me. I will tell you that. Like, I kind of have a stomach for it. I think my dad was very similar. So I kind of was raised with that. But, people that work around me are a little bit more sensitive to some of the feedback and the way that they're being managed at times. So that's probably the hardest part is, and people that worked for founders in this room, I saw a couple of heads shaking. You know what I mean. So, yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
All right, give it up for Maria.